All right, so again, greetings as always. Shalom and salam ta. Yohannes, Wolde, Amanuel, Ras Yefdeyah, Lidj Yefdi here, RastafariRenaissance.com. And as many ones, of course, around in our own circle, of course, especially on Discipleship Radio, RastafariGroundation.com, may be, of course, aware of, my own situation. Of course, here with the postings there on RastafariRenaissance.com, we were just a slight bit tardy in posting, our usual weekly rendition of the Sabbatour portion for RSS, so the sabbatical study of the 11th for Wayegash or Vayegash. Um, of course, we're going through a few updates ourselves as well as with Rastafari Groundation as well, and of course we'll have all of these links in the description box for ones, of course, inquiring to, of course, get connected, and of course open up an account there with us to, of course, keep up with most of the updates coming forward, of course, in the next few months or so, and just really reorganizing much of our works. But here, just this post mostly leading for the subject of our post studies from Chanukah, as well as Gena Be'al, or YeLidet Jesus, and really speaking more so on this just to run by the information that may have gone unnoticed, and really just to have more so a debriefing so that ones will gain a bit more understanding of this particular time of year, and not be so caught up in the muck and mire of the commercialism, of course, which goes on every year around this time. So especially dealing with culture and heritage, this really gives us a discipline to follow so that we retain much of our ancestry, our spirituality, mentally and physically. And so continuing in our studies and bringing about a progressive consciousness, especially what we pertaining to most of the posts which I bring forward from Rastafari Groundation and, of course, Rastafari Renaissance itself. The main intent, is to, never despise or really deviate from the humble beginnings from which we, of course, have started and initiated. So really just staying in the lines of the context and adding on to the elements that make up the Rastafari collective mentality and the connectivity in which we share in this way of life that really reflects the combination of religious ideas or spiritual ideas, community accountability, and more so the reaffirmation of, and really reinforcing just more so the moral code, which we have, of course, sought to not only exploit, but, disseminate, of course, to as many as will receive it. So really going forward, we are continuing our studies in the examination of the original historical events of the past, which have been tied to, much of what ones know as religious tradition. And especially here coming to this just past few days and a few couple of sevens or couple of weeks from Chanukah. And really contrary to many of the modern interpretations of this appointed time in Hebraic theology or ideology, it's Hanukkah, of course, is not an equivalent to what they would know as, especially in Western countries and Western Christianity, Roman Christianity, as an equivalent to Christmas or their Christmas as they present it. Throughout many centuries that have passed since the actual happenings of this significant event, and speaking of Hanukkah, there have been modifications to the recognition of the events that took place during this time of year. But just going a bit deeper than what's been presented on the surface of available information spread throughout the world today, we find that Hanukkah, really it showed itself to be a shining example and a lesson learned of the struggle for survival, especially particularly to the Hebraic culture and faith. So I'm really looking in the more so the time period of around 300 BC up until about 100 AD or so, more so 200 AD. We have the Greco or the Grecian empire of the Seleucids or the Seleucids. This empire, of course, initiated by Alexander the Greek. His infantry, led by one Seleucus Nicanor, or Seleucus the First, who really, from the empire of the Near East, gets its name. It really built itself around this Seleucus or Seleucus Nicanor. So finding him in antiquity, it shouldn't be very difficult. But during the reign of Alexander the Greek, his armies had conquered places like Syria, northern Egypt, Palestine, or the Levant, and what they know today. But it really allowed lands to come under his control, speaking of Alexander the Greek. But in that, Alexander continued to allow the peoples of those lands to really continue to practice their own faiths, their own practices, their customs, and of course, pertaining to their culture, their religion, so to speak, and really more so retain a certain degree of autonomy, even under his rule of that part of the Grecian Empire. So really so under this relatively benevolent rule, many Hebraic or Judean peoples, of course, were along in that group, and really there was a portion that assimilated to much of the Hellenistic culture or the Greco culture, the Grecian culture, even so adopting much of the language, the customs, and the dress of the Greeks in ways like, any other immigrant would adopt to the culture of their newly found domicile or settlement. So really at this point, for more than about a century, about 100 years or so, one of the four successors of Alexander the Greek was one called Antiochus the Fourth, or Antiochus Epiphanes, and he came to control the region of Syria, the Levant, and much of northern Egypt, and he began to oppress many of the peoples, and the Israelites or the Hebrews being one singled out in that oppression severely. So placing a Hellenistic priest or a Judean, really one who assimilated very easily or very, without much degree of difficulty, I should say, in the Temple of Jerusalem, and at a point where the Judeans of that period were resisting much of the Grecian or the Greco empire, its culture. It really just not assimilating at all, just very resistant to much of what Greece had to offer there in the province of Judea. And at that point, after appointing this Hellenistic Judean priest, he definitely deviated from much of the practices in which many of the Hebrews or the Jews or those Judeans of that period of time had really more so accepted and passed down and really kept in their culture from such a time up until that point. So it really came to a point where an outrage amongst many of the resistant Hebraic peoples or Judean peoples of that area had really found in utter disregard and really attempted to really separate themselves or really free themselves of this oppressive Greco-Grecian empire and all of its its wiles from that point, especially in the region, and more so two particular groups amongst the Hebrews or the Judeans of that period opposed Antiochus, and one being the Hasmoneans or the Heshmoneim. And they were led, of course, by one Matityahu, Hebraically speaking, or Matthias, the Hasmonean, as well as his son Yehuda Maccabi. Maccabi, of course, coming to the equivalent of the hammer in the English. So Judah Maccabi, and more so his name, of course, graces the town of Maccabi, Tel Aviv or Tel Aviv in modern day Israel today. So his lineage, of course, and his, I guess you can say, legacy still lives on, even from the time of the revolt led there with his father. And there was also a second group who were more so the traditionalists of that period of time in the Judean area in that period of time, known as the Hasidians or the Hasidim. And this more so preceded the Pharisaical, the Sadducean, and the Essenean period of time there in the Levant, and much of the modern movement of Hasidic Judaism or Hasidim has no immediate ties to these Hasidians or these Hasidim of the Maccabean revolt. They definitely pulled and they definitely drew much of their interpretations of scripture, their interpretations of the culture, and the applicable mannerisms. Much of it was pulled from this period of time. So the Hasidians or the Hasidim, were definitely a precursor to what you know as a modern Orthodox Judaism of today. Now, but back to the original topic. This revolution of the Judeans succeeded, and of course, the Temple of Jerusalem was reclaimed. And in so many words, it was reconsecrated, rededicated. That's why the interpretations or the definitions given for Chanukkah is the Festival of Lights, or the dedication of the temple. And really more so bringing that interpretation to a lot of its applicable, I guess you can say, summation, and really of these events that took place. It really brought the commemoration of this quote-unquote Moedim, or this appointed time, to the recognition of what you know as Hanukkah today. It really served as the cognitive celebration over the victory over the religious, the traditional, and heritage keepers over the internal subtle subversion and really divisions that were really set. And of course, the external threat of this Seleucid Grecian dominance that was put forward to these Judeans of this time. So really with this, it really becomes very interesting in study, especially of these Hebraic peoples, because much of the books of there are 4 books of Maccabees, and these books were excluded, of course, from the 1611 or any of the King James Version's Holy Bibles. But we find that amongst much of the Orthodox or the Oriental Christian religions or the faiths, we find that these books are included, along with books like the Book of Jubilees, the books of Ezra, the Book of Enoch,
and more so finding themselves in a compilation in what many would know today as the Apocrypha or the apocryphal books. So that really explains much on a lot of the points coming forward to this. Now, another interesting point again, just to point out, because in the initial, we really sought to bring out these historical events and much of their, understanding points of reference as a precursor to what we've been studying and what we see out here in the world today. Now, this Hanukkah always tends to come up within Hebraic form of reference and study when ones have reached the 10th Torah portion, or Miketz, or Bechalam, Ethiopically speaking, especially from our perspective as Rastafari Ethiopian Hebrews. So, really moving forward with that, we find that this Chanukah did take place historically during the winter time. Even so, as according to the King James Version of the Bible in the book of John, chapter 10, verse 22, as it reads, and it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication, and it was winter. And, of course, Be'amarenya, or in the Amharic language, Be Jerusalem, Yemek Des, Metaris Be'al Hone, Yemek Des, Metaris Be'al being the Ethiopic title, of course, for this commemoration. And Hebraically speaking, Weyehi, Bimei Ha Chanukah, Bimei Ha Choref, Be Jerusalem. So just seeing that most of the sayings, the titles are found, of course, specifically within the text. We, of course, solidify our studies and understanding, of course, of this Moedim, or this appointed time, this commemoration and rededication, so to speak, of the Temple of Jerusalem, to be a very interesting point of reference, and also another notch, really to really give accreditation to much of the extra biblical text. So really finding that these Hasidim and these Hasmoneans, or the Maccabees, finding themselves juxtaposed against the Seleucid Grecian Empire, as well as those assimilated Hellenistic Jews. In the book of Maccabees, as well as the book of Jubilees of the Apocrypha, we again mentioned that this was more so a precursor to the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes. Now, seeing that Chanukah, of course, comes up during the time of what they would know in Western Christianity as the date corresponds more so in and around December 25th, and very close, usually every year. It's probably more so a day or two before, after, give or take what year one might be in, especially according to a leap year. We find that most of these instances really pertain a lot, not only to the coming of Christ, but really the valiance of the Hebraic peoples, especially in their time, not only of desperation, but a heavy time in which oppression was placed upon them, and they finding the resistance and the fortitude to stand on their beliefs or their faith. So even so, coming to what ones would know as YeLidet Jesus, or YeLidet Be'al, Gena Be'al, and even more so in the Oriental or Orthodox Christian faith. Many would more so celebrate rightfully the birth, but more so the baptism of Christ during the time of January the 7th, so a week or two or so post what they would know as in Western Christianity as Christmas. Many bring that forward in many other interpretations. Now, of course, revisiting this Antiochus the Fourth or Antiochus Epiphanes, the name Epiphanes from the Greek comes to an equivalent of the manifestation of God. So, in many instances of the Grecian culture, especially during that period of time, many rulers sought to liken themselves to God or demigods, or so to speak, really gods on earth, or really just showing a persistence of self-mastery. So we see that this Antiochus taking up this name, and even so to the Oriental Christian faiths, seeing that they didn't recognize ones of this Grecian empire as manifestations of God, but more so giving the affinity more so towards their own faith, and showing that even so this January 7th, or this Orthodox Christian Christmas, was the Epiphany, so to speak. So even more so interesting than that point, and delving a bit more into that, we bring ourselves to many calculations that, of course, have come forward. And we make the mention of the baptism, or in many other circles, the presentation of whom they would know as Jesus or Jesus, the Christ, the Mashiach. There, according to the King James Version, we cite this from the baptizer Simeon, according to Luke chapter 2, verses 25 to 26. Now, of course, during the first 3 centuries AD, in the churches of more so Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria, and Cyprus, the nativity of Christ was combined together with the feasts of his baptism, which of course corresponds to January 6th and 7th. And of course, this corresponding in the Grecian culture as the theophany, again showing that equivalence to the manifestation of God. Now, this was because of a belief that Christ was baptized on the anniversary of his birth, which may be inferred by one Saint John. I think that's Chrysostom, and he brought forth a sermon on the nativity of Christ. And I think that one quote mentioned that it's not on the day which Christ was born, but the day of the theophany or the epiphany, in which he was baptized, which was brought forward by this St. John Chrysostom, and more so commemorated by many of the Oriental or Orthodox churches, or the Eastern Christians, so to speak. So, in the Ethiopic interpretations, which are Orthodox to a certain extent, or classified as Oriental and Orthodox, but having their own, of course, manifestations and calculations and interpretations, of course, are bringing forward from the Julian calendar's framework, which predates, of course, the Western Christian calculations, or the Gregorian calendar. And many of these Eastern Christian or Orthodox Christian sects, many Orthodox Christians observe the nativity and adoration of the shepherds, or the adoration of the Magi, and also corresponding to this date, January 6th, January 7th. So many, of course, attend services and liturgies, or both, and more so modern times. But as always, one's really have to pay attention to the artwork, not only of the Ethiopic Church, but the Oriental Orthodox Christian churches as well, because it, of course, brings in another framework in which, if you're studying the King James version of the Bible as well as the extra biblical text, the artwork, of course, illustrates many of the points, as well as ones may not have noticed, but the Magi, or the three kings, or the three wise men, as they are said, of course, in modern times, don't show up until Christ had already been born. So that leaving another frame of reference and another point of study for ones to bring out and really research themselves is an interesting point, again, to revisit, of course, especially from these extra biblical texts, or these extra biblical literary works. And more so, just even so, pointing to, we could go into many of the points of how one Saint Nicholas does not equal what they know as this Santa Claus or Sinterklaas, more so of these Nordic and I guess you can say Wiccan religions or faiths or creeds or cults. More so, this Saint Nicholas, of course, is venerated, of course, in the Oriental Orthodox churches, of course, as a pristine teacher, a kind man, a man of values, and of course was summoned, according to history, by Constantine, the emperor of Byzantium at that time, to attend the Council of Nicaea. And at this Council of Nicaea, this Saint Nicholas, whose name and affinity have been subverted and more so stolen and used to create this facade of this Santa Claus, or this Western Christian, I guess you can say, theology, ideology of pure fantasy in so many ways, has been, more so taken and used to create, this, of course, false rhetoric. So this real man who lived during the time of the 3rd and 4th century, attended the Council of Nicaea, and of course was juxtaposed, in a similar manner as the Hasidian and the Hasmoneans to the Greco Empire and the Hellenistic Jews, the assimilators, to Arianism, or what they would know as Arian Christianity at that time. A quote just from much of my studies here comes forward, and just to solidify more so the claims that I've just brought forward here. It says in many points, Saint Nicholas would return to his post as Bishop of Myra. This is the place where Saint Nicholas was originally from, and later even answered to the request of Constantine to appear at the first Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Now, at this council, he apparently rejected the teachings of Arianism. One Saint Methodius allegedly quoted him saying, or at least he was quoted, thanks to the teaching of this Saint Nicholas of Myra alone was untouched by the filth of the Arian heresy, which it firmly rejected as a death-dealing poison. Now, this Saint Nicholas would also be heralded as one of the many bishops at the council to sign the Nicene Creed as a defender of the Orthodox faith. Now, of course, here on this channel, this is a Rastafari channel, Ethiopian Hebrew channel. So a title like the Defender of the Faith holds very dear, of course, to many ones, of course, of my own affinity. But much of this one Saint Nicholas of Myra, venerated by the Orthodox or the Oriental Christian churches, had a very generous and kind life, according to their interpretations and dissemination of his history. And he was really steeped in legend in much of what he brought forward, especially coming forward from the a Russian Orthodox church as well. Much has been disseminated on the history of this one Saint Nicholas. So just throwing certain things like this out there for research, and of course many more links will be placed in the description box, just to more so build on what ones have received, of course, in this time, and really give more info and more solidifying claims for ones to really build on their own interpretations of this historical event, or these historical events, and much of the faith-based knowledge that had come out of them.